Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're jumping into a massive topic, the history of us, Homo sapiens. We're using insights from excerpts you listeners shared from Yuval Noah Harari's Sapiens.
Yes, it's quite a journey, isn't it?
Mm.
The book really frames it as going from, well, pretty insignificant animals.
Right. Animals of no significance, I think was the phrase.
Exactly. To now, well, shaping the entire planet.
So our goal today, our mission, is to really nail down the key turning points. According to Harari, what actually drove this massive transformation, we want to give everyone listening a kind of shortcut to those big ideas.
Absolutely. The material you sent over highlights these four major shifts, these revolutions.
Okay.
First up, there's the cognitive revolution. That seems to be where our unique thinking and, importantly, our language really kicked off.
Got it.
Then the agricultural revolution, which might not be the simple step forward people often think it is. We'll get into that.
Intriguing. Okay, number 3.
The unification of humankind, this kind of slow trend of smaller groups becoming part of these bigger interconnected societies.
Interesting.
And finally, the scientific revolution, which, totally changed our relationship with knowledge, progress, everything, really.
And you mentioned some provocative ideas we'll touch on.
Yeah, like that idea that farming might have been history's biggest fraud.
Right, heard about that one.
And even the possibility that, sapiens might not be the end of the story. We could evolve or even be replaced.
Wow. Okay, definitely a lot to unpack. Let's start at the beginning then. The cognitive revolution. Where were we, say, 100,000 years ago?
Well, the key thing to remember, based on the excerpts, is we weren't alone.
Right, not the only humans.
Exactly. There were Neanderthals, mainly in Europe, very well adapted, Denisovans in Asia, others maybe too. We, Homo sapiens, were just one group, mostly in East Africa. Not particularly special, really.
Kind of humbling, isn't it?
It is. We weren't dominant, not by a long shot.
So what changed? The sources point to this cognitive revolution maybe 70,000 to 30,000 years ago. What was the actual development?
It seems to be the emergence of a fundamentally new kind of language.
Okay, new language. But what does that mean? Like more words?
It's more than just words for things you can see, like lion or rock. It's about the ability to talk about abstract concepts, things that aren't right there in front of you.
Abstract, like what? Give me an example.
Okay, so instead of just shouting danger when you see a lion, you could maybe talk about the spirit of the lion or where the lion usually hunts, or crucially, plan complex actions. Like, okay, tomorrow at dawn, you guys hide by the river bend, we'll drive the gazelles towards you.
Ah, okay. That planning aspect, that example of the gazelle ambush really clicks. You need shared understanding, a mental map, future thinking.
Precisely. It suggests a big cognitive leap, discussing things that don't physically exist or haven't happened yet.
And this leads to what the excerpts call shared fictions.
Exactly. These are things that aren't objectively real, but crucially, large groups of people believe in them together.
So like tribal spirits, gods, maybe even early versions of nations or laws.
Yes. Think about religion, tribal identity, myths. These shared beliefs create trust and allow for cooperation on a scale never seen before.
Because you trust someone who believes the same foundational story, even if you've never met them.
You got it. Imagine trying to build, say, a large hunting party or defend territory with hundreds of people who only trust their immediate family. It wouldn't work. Shared myths provide that social glue.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like a collective agreement that enables large-scale action. The excerpts also mention our impact pretty early on, right? When we started moving out of Africa.
Yeah, it seems this new cognitive ability, this cooperation, fueled our expansion across the globe, starting maybe 70,000 years ago.
And this wasn't always great news for the existing ecosystems.
Unfortunately, no. The arrival of sapiens in new lands often coincides with, well, mass extinctions, especially of the megafauna, the really big animals.
That diprotodon example in Australia is stark. Huge wombat-like thing disappears around 45,000 years ago, right when humans show up.
Those sources suggest hunting, maybe habitat changes from fire use. It's hard to know for sure, but the correlation is strong.
So our global impact started early, a sobering thought.
It is. But, the excerpts also caution against seeing these early hunter-gatherers purely through a lens of struggle.
Ah, right. Challenging the stereotype of the brutal short life.
Exactly. The picture Harari paints, based on the evidence, is maybe Well, potentially fewer working hours than later farmers.
Really?
Potentially, yeah, more varied diets, definitely. Strong social connections, deep knowledge of their environment.
Like that image of the woman teaching kids about plants or hunters tracking using passed down knowledge. It sounds rich in its own way.
Rich, complex, certainly challenging, but maybe not the constant, desperate grind we sometimes imagine, especially as the source material suggests when you compare it to what came next.
Okay, perfect transition. The agricultural revolution, around 10,000 BCE, farming begins. And this is where we get that provocative idea. History's biggest fraud. Why fraud?
Well, the argument isn't that farming didn't produce more food overall, it did,
Okay, seems like a good thing.
but the cost for the average person. That's the issue. Early farmers, like those growing wheat in the Fertile Crescent, seem to have worked much harder.
Harder than foragers.
Yes, much more physically demanding repetitive labor, tied to one plot of land. And their diets often became less diverse. A lot of wheat, maybe, instead of the wide range of plants and animals foragers ate.
So, more work, maybe poorer nutrition. And living closer together probably meant more disease, too.
Exactly. Denser populations, reliance on fewer crops. It could be a recipe for trouble if that crop failed. So the fraud is that while humanity as a whole got more calories, the individual farmer's life might have gotten tougher, less healthy, more precarious in some ways.
That really flips the script on the whole farming is progress narrative. It wasn't necessarily progress for everyone involved, at least not initially.
It forces you to ask what progress even means, right? And this surplus food paradoxically fueled population growth.
Which then required more farming, more intensive labor.
It's a cycle. A trap, Harari calls it.
But, okay, the surplus did allow for other things, didn't it? The excerpts mention cities, hierarchies.
Absolutely. That's the other side of the coin. You get food security, enough surplus to support people who aren't farming. Specialists emerge.
Priests, rulers, soldiers, artisans.
Right. But this specialization immediately creates inequality. Some people control the surplus, control the land, control the information. Elites emerge.
And how did they maintain that control? Back to those imagined orders.
Precisely. Things like the divine right of kings or religious systems that justify the social structure. The gods ordained it this way. These shared beliefs keep the hierarchy in place.
That Sumer example around 3000 BCE is vivid. Gods validating kings, scribes tracking barley. It all fits together.
It shows the power of these shared stories to structure society. And you asked earlier about other examples, things like corporations, nations, human rights.
Yeah.
Harari argues they're the same kind of thing, imagined orders. Powerful because we collectively agree to act as if they're real. They shape everything.
That's a really powerful lens to view society through. And writing came into this how? Not for poetry, apparently.
No, not initially. The excerpts are clear. The earliest writing seems to be basically accounting.
Seriously, like keeping track of grain.
Exactly. Mesopotamian scribes, 2500 BCE, logging deliveries, debts, taxes. Managing the resources generated by agriculture was crucial.
Which, again, reinforces the power of the elites who control that information and those resources.
Absolutely. And these agricultural societies also saw the rise of really rigid hierarchies based on class, gender, sometimes ethnicity or race, all often justified by the prevailing myths and imagined orders.
The ancient Egypt example, with divine kingship locking people into roles based on birth, it shows how deeply these inequalities could become embedded.
It's quite sobering. But then, over the long term, the excerpts describe another major trend, kind of pulling in the opposite direction, the unification of humankind.
Right, smaller groups merging into bigger systems. How did that happen? Trade seems key.
Trade was huge. Think of the Silk Road. It wasn't just silk moving back and forth.
Ideas, too. Technology.
Everything. Religions, like Buddhism spreading across Asia. Diseases, unfortunately. Technologies. It connected distant cultures in unprecedented ways.
And money played a role here, too, didn't it? As another shared fiction.
A massive role.
Yeah.
The idea that this random piece of metal, like a Roman denarius, has value wherever you go, simply because everyone believes it does.
Yeah.
That's revolutionary for trade.
Yeah.
It creates a universal system of trust and value between complete strangers from different cultures.
Makes sense. What else drove unification? Empires.
Empires were critical. Conquest brought diverse peoples under one rule. Think Rome again.
Spreading Latin, Roman law.
Exactly. And over time, conquered people often adopted aspects of the imperial culture, creating larger, more homogeneous zones, often justified by some universal ideal like bringing civilization.
Bringing order, yeah. And religion.
Especially the big universalizing religions, particularly monotheism, Christianity and the Roman Empire. later Islam. They offered a shared identity, a universal moral code that transcended local tribes or customs.
So it's this mix of money, empires, and universal religions pushing towards larger, more integrated human societies.
That seems to be the argument in the excerpts, yes. It wasn't always smooth or peaceful, obviously.
No, definitely not.
But the overall trend was towards greater interconnection, fueled by these flexible belief systems, trade, adaptable empires. Even empires like the Mongols, despite the brutality, ended up connecting East and West significantly.
Okay, so after thousands of years of agriculture and this slow unification, then comes the scientific revolution around 1500 CE. What makes this one so different?
It's a fundamental shift in mindset, according to Harari. The key thing, admitting ignorance.
Admitting we don't know things, that sounds simple, but
It was radical. Before, knowledge was often seen as coming from ancient texts, divine revelation, tradition. The idea was that the important stuff was already known. The scientific revolution said, actually, we don't know everything. Let's go find out. Through observation, experiment.
and a focus on progress, right? That things can get better through new knowledge.
Yes. The Columbus example is interesting here. He was wrong about where he was going.
Totally wrong.
But the willingness to sail into the unknown, acknowledging geographic ignorance, led to huge discoveries. It embodies that spirit.
And this new science got tangled up with empires pretty quickly.
Very quickly. The excerpts stress this interdependence. Empires funded exploration and research, think Captain Cook's voyages, mapping the Pacific.
Right.
And science provided tools for empire, better navigation, weapons, medicine, understanding resources. Think of botanists like Joseph Banks collecting plants for the British Empire, looking for economic potential.
Science serving power and power funding science.
It was a potent combination. And then you throw in another key ingredient.
Yeah.
Capitalism.
How does that fit in?
Capitalism, based on the idea of investing for future growth, needing credit, trusting the future will be bigger and better than the present provided the money.
The funding mechanism.
Exactly. Investing in risky scientific ventures or massive trading expeditions, like the Dutch East India Company, that requires a belief in future profits and a system of credit. Capitalism provided both, fueling science and empire.
Okay, so science, empire, capitalism, all driving each other. And this leads to
The Industrial Revolution, around 1800 onwards. Science and new energy sources, coal, then oil applied to production.
mass production, factories, steam engines.
Total transformation. The scale of change was unprecedented. Think of those textile mills in England just churning out cloth. It changed where people lived, how they worked, everything.
And the excerpts say this kicked off a kind of permanent revolution, constant change.
Yeah, that's a key point. Before, things changed slowly. Now, driven by science and industry, change became constant, accelerating. Traditions were overturned, ways of life disrupted.
Even something like time got standardized.
Right. You needed synchronized clocks for railway timetables across Britain. Little things like that show how deeply industrialization reshaped daily life.
It's almost hard to grasp the speed of it all. Which brings us to that big question the excerpts raise. Has all this progress actually made us happier?
The million-dollar question indeed. Objectively, things are better in many ways, right? Life expectancy is shot up, literacy is widespread.
Definitely, compared to 1900, say.
Huge improvements.
Yeah.
But the sources also point to downsides. Alienation in mass society. Growing inequality, perhaps. The massive environmental costs.
Yeah, the environmental damage is undeniable.
So it's a paradox. We have more stuff, live longer, no more. But are we fundamentally more content? It's not clear. The excerpts suggest maybe not, or at least it's complicated.
It makes you think, what are we actually optimizing for?
A very deep question, and it leads right into the final, really mind-bending part. The potential end of Homo sapiens as we know it.
Through what? Bioengineering.ai?
All of the above. The ability to directly edit our genes with things like CRISPR.
Yeah, I've read about that.
Creating artificial intelligence that might surpass our own. Merging humans with machines. Cyborgs. These aren't just sci-fi anymore.
The excerpts suggest these could fundamentally change what it means to be human, or even lead to our replacement.
That's the provocative possibility raised. If we can design our children, enhance our abilities beyond recognition, create non-biological consciousness, are we still Homo sapiens? Or something else? It raises huge ethical questions.
Definitely. Wow. Okay, so wrapping this all up, if you had to boil down the core message from these Sapiens excerpts, what would it be?
I think it comes back to that central idea. Our superpower, The thing that took us from insignificant apes to planetary rulers is our ability to create and believe in shared fictions.
Money, gods, nations, laws, human rights.
All these things that exist only in our collective imagination, but allow us to cooperate flexibly and in massive numbers. It's given us almost godlike powers to reshape the world.
Godlike, yeah, that's the term used.
But, and this is the crucial concluding thought in the material, that power comes with enormous responsibility.
Responsibility for the planet, for other species, for our own future.
Exactly. Climate change, the risks of new technologies, these are challenges born from our own success, from the power our fictions unleashed. We're now in the driver's seat, whether we like it or not.
Which leaves us, and everyone listening, with a pretty heavy final thought, doesn't it?
That does. Given this incredible power to create realities through shared belief and our growing technological might, what kind of future should we create?
What fictions should guide us now? What values? What stories do we need to tell ourselves to navigate the challenges ahead?
That's the question Harari seems to leave us with. What we want to become, and what responsibilities do we have now that we have this power?
A lot to chew on there. Definitely the mark of a true deep dive. Thanks for walking us through that.
My pleasure. It's fascinating stuff.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us on the deep dive.